Subscribe to the MTL World at Malworld 1 YouTube channel. Novel, Night Without Borders. Chapter 16, Eliminating the Enemy. Author, Chen Dong. Translator, Shadow Knight AK. Editor, Shadow Knight AK. The snow ape was cleaved in two with a single strike, a sight that sent a chill down Xiao Chengfeng and Feng Yian's spines. They instinctively retreated, their doubts about whether their team leader could truly defeat him resurfacing. Fu Entao's expression shifted slightly, but his attack remained unaffected. Seizing the opening Qin Ming had created by sidestepping the snow ape's attack, his gleaming longsword sliced through the wind and snow, aiming for a horizontal cut across Qin Ming's waist with immense force. As if anticipating the move, Qin Ming raised his left hand, holding his spear behind him in a defensive posture, back-facing Fu Entao. Then, with a leap, he used the crushing blow of Fu Entao's sword against the spear shaft to propel himself forward. An ordinary person wouldn't dare attempt such a maneuver. Even if they weren't instantly cleaved in two, the sheer force of the impact would leave them severely injured, possibly even coughing up blood. Qin Ming, however, remained unharmed. With a single bound, he closed the distance to his target. The burly mountain patrolman's hair stood on end. It was clear the other man was coming for him, moving with the ferocity of a giant beast. As Qin Ming landed, a blinding blade of light flashed before his eyes. He immediately swung his own blade in defense, intending to meet the attack head-on. But in an instant, he realized he could barely maintain his grip on the hilt. The other man's strength was simply too overwhelming. Two brief, violent clashes were enough to split the soft flesh between his fingers, causing blood to gush out and stain the hilt of his blade. He could no longer hold his sword. PFF'd. Reflected in the light of the fire spring, a brilliant blade flashed through the air, severing his head. His headless body crashed to the ground with a thud. Qin Ming spun around, using his iron spear to block Fu Entao's long blade. He then turned his murderous gaze on Feng Yian and Xiao Chengfeng. The two men were terrified. They were usually ruthless, their hearts as cold and cunning as jackals, always scheming and resorting to underhanded tactics. But this young man was too brutal. Without a word, he had charged in and killed, sending shivers down their spines. Fu Entao's heart was also clouded with dread. The pressure exerted by this second awakened youth was immense. Every thrust of his spear, every slash of his blade, left his arm numb. He desperately wanted to flee, to escape into the dark depths of the mountain forest. But he feared that turning his back on his opponent would leave him vulnerable to a fatal follow-up attack. Qin Ming spoke. There are 7 heads to be taken at the mountain stronghold. 4 have already fallen. That leaves only the 3 of you. Fu Entao froze, his face darkening. This youth had grouped the golden mastiff, the snow ape, and them together, treating them as equals to 2 beasts. Xiao Chengfeng and Feng Yian gripped their iron spears and long saber tightly. If anyone dared to insult them like this in normal times, they'd be courting death. Qin Ming was deliberately trying to provoke them, sensing that the 3 were wavering and might be considering fleeing. He feared he wouldn't be able to catch up to Fu Entao, who had undergone second awakening. As expected, the shadow of doubt that had just flickered in Fu Entao's mind vanished, replaced by burning fury. Even the most senior team leaders of other mountain patrol groups in this area wouldn't dare humiliate him like this. Fu Entao had spent years cultivating, on the verge of breaking through to the next level, his fingers already brushing the threshold. Is he the Qin Ming from Twin Tree Village? Fu Entao asked the 2 men behind him. Earlier, when they had discussed the blood bamboo forest, Feng Yian and Xiao Chengfeng had both mentioned Qin Ming, intending to use the young man with a golden foundation to scout the path and then eliminate him. It's him. Feng Yian, the bearded man, nodded. Fu Entao nodded in return, then spoke coldly. Fine. After this, we'll slaughter Twin Tree Village. Leave no man, woman, or child alive. During this special period, after the mountain sweep operation begins, it's only natural for an unexpected, named beast, to wander out of the deep mountains and massacre the village. The smile he revealed was cold, as if tinged with blood. He slowly raised his long blade. Qin Ming remained unprovoked. He wanted to stir his opponent's emotions, so they wouldn't lose their fighting spirit and flee in the short term. He added fuel to the fire, saying, wasn't what I said about you earlier true? Kaisha City pays you quite a lot, and the villagers respects you. They'd rather see their fire fields yield less than refuse to help the mountain patrol group plant Black Moon medicine herb. But how have you repaid them? You've drained the pond to catch the fish, sucked the essence from their bones, and greedily devoured all the spiritual essence from the fire spring, regardless of how many people starve to death in the coming famine. You've even callously murdered innocent villagers to intimidate and deter others. In your eyes, their lives are worth less than a roe deer, far less than your pampered golden mastiffs. Do you even possess a shred of humanity? Am I wrong to compare you to vicious dogs and snow apes? You are far more dangerous than they are. Think of the mountain patrol group's previous old group leader and the responsible mountain patrolmen in other teams. Compared to them, you are utterly unworthy to stand beside them. Qin Ming spoke calmly, without passion or anger, his voice barely raised above a whisper. This revelation caused Fu Entao's hand, gripping his blade, to tense with bulging veins. He remained silent, instead advancing aggressively. Even Feng Yian and Xiao Chengfeng radiated murderous intent, itching to eliminate this calm-spoken youth who had pierced their hearts with his words. Qin Ming struck first. With a single hand, he wielded the heavy iron spear as if it were an extension of his arm. The spearhead flashed, leaving afterimages that stirred up the swirling snow. When Fu Entao dodged, the spearhead pierced a bull-thick larch tree behind him. Qin Ming gripped the shaft and swung it with a slight force, causing the trunk to snap with a loud crack. Immediately, the wood-chopping knife in his other hand followed suit. In a flash, the space between them was filled with a dense web of blade light. Their exchange was incredibly dangerous, leaving a trail of fallen trees in their wake, the destruction staggering. As they fought near the fire spring, a massive wooden cabin exploded into splinters under their blades with a resounding boom. The nearly 2-meter-tall Fu Entao, once a figure of imposing presence, now gasped for breath. Mist steamed from his naturally curled hair. He was terrified. His body was exhausted, his arms numb from the tremors, yet his opponent remained as fierce as ever. If Qin Ming hadn't been fast enough, he would have been defeated long ago. He sensed something was amiss with his opponent's speed and realized his own advantage. At that moment, his opportunity arrived. While Qin Ming was thrusting his spear and swinging his knife, Feng Yian and Xiao Chengfeng unleashed their full power, striking suddenly. Clang! A piercing clash of steel erupted as Qin Ming blocked Xiao Chengfeng's iron spear with his knife and swiftly knocked Feng Yian's long saber aside with the back of his blade. At that moment, Fu Entao resembled a human-shaped tiger wolf, his ferocity unmatched. His hair whipped wildly in the snowstorm, his eyes sharpened to an icy glare. Gripping his long saber with both hands, he unleashed a relentless barrage of strikes, each blow delivered with full force. He noticed that Qin Ming's grip on the iron spear with one hand had weakened, his strength clearly diminished, as if he were on the verge of being overwhelmed. Give it everything you've got and surround him. He roared. Qin Ming fended off the other two with his cleaver, while Fu Entao's relentless saber strikes had suppressed his left-hand iron spear, leaving him looking precarious. On several occasions, in the face of deadly exchanges, Qin Ming chose a mutually destructive strategy. He allowed Fu Entao's long saber to cleave down, yet his spear tip continued to thrust forward, forcing his opponent to retreat. Fu Entao revealed a cruel smile. He wasn't afraid of anyone when it came to ruthlessness. With a sudden leap forward, he focused solely on avoiding vital areas of his upper body, swinging his gleaming longsword down at Qin Ming in a vertical slash. Simultaneously, Feng Yian and Xiao Chengfeng's faces twisted into savage grins. Their coordinated attack sealed off Qin Ming's escape routes. With longsword and iron spear leveled, Qin Ming's wood-chopping knife could only be used to parry their onslaught. Unable to retreat or dodge Fu Entao's descending blade, Qin Ming made an instant decision. He accelerated forward, too late to raise his spear. Its trajectory remained unchanged as it plunged into Fu Entao's thigh, piercing completely through. Though Fu Entao's face twitched, his expression hardened further. In this desperate exchange of wounds, he had only lost a leg. His longsword, still arcing through the air, could cleave his opponent in two. At this critical moment, Qin Ming's right hand was still occupied with defending against the other two attackers. He abandoned his iron spear, raising his left arm to meet the razor-sharp blade head-on. Fu Entao sneered contemptuously. With a strike like that, I'd sever both his arm and the man himself. Feng Yian and Xiao Chengfeng chuckled as well. No one understood better than they how terrifying a 2-meter-tall team leader's cleaving strike could be. They could almost see the bloody scene unfolding before them. But then, a sharp clang echoed, accompanied by a grating metal-on-metal sound. The reality was far different from their expectations. Qin Ming's outer garment shattered, revealing the armor exclusive to Mountain Patrol Group members. And he wasn't wearing just one layer. While this armor wasn't as refined as team leader Fu Entao's, Qin Ming had layered it 3 times, which was more than enough to deflect the blade. If it weren't for the added bulk, Qin Ming might have even donned the armor of the 4 men he'd killed at the foot of the mountain. With a thud, Fu Entao landed awkwardly from midair, stumbling as his thigh was pierced. The iron spear remained lodged in his leg, and blood gushed forth. He could no longer stand. Feng Yian turned and fled without hesitation, his decisiveness absolute. He knew the entire mountain patrol group was likely doomed. Xiao Chengfeng realized the youth's earlier slump had been a deliberate ploy. He immediately turned and fled as well. Qin Ming picked up an iron spear from the ground, leapt into the air, and hurled it with all his might. At such close range, it was a guaranteed hit. The spear shot through the air, piercing Feng Yian's back from above and pinning him to the ground with a sickening thud. Ah! Feng Yian cried out in agony, unable to die instantly. He struggled in vain, pinned to the spot. The moment Qin Ming landed, he pursued the other fleeing figure. His speed was slightly inferior to Fu Entao's, but catching Xiao Chengfeng was effortless. Xiao Chengfeng wouldn't surrender without a fight. He turned and wielded his iron spear in a desperate counterattack, but it was futile. Qin Ming's blade severed his right arm. The iron spear clattered to the ground. Qin picked it up and, without mercy, pinned Xiao Chengfeng to the spot with the long spear as well. The ground around them was instantly stained crimson. Qin stood in the center of the arena and spoke, "If you hadn't tried to escape and had fought me to the death right here, I believe I would have eliminated you all long ago. But I had to split my attention, fearing that one of you might slip away. Even if a single one of you had escaped, it would have meant the failure of this mountain sweep operation. You." Fu Entao leaned on his longsword for support, nearly spitting up blood in his fury. He thought Qin was spouting nonsense. "Fighting you all while distracted was indeed challenging, but I'm still relatively new to my awakening, so it's understandable," Qin said, reviewing the battle. "What?" Fu Entao's expression froze, his heart trembling. He couldn't believe Qin was a first awakener. He refused to accept such a reality. "So you truly haven't undergone second awakening yet," Feng Yian spat out a mouthful of blood, laughing bitterly. He knew they were completely finished, having encountered such an unbelievable monster. Blank. End of chapter. Subscribe to the MTL World at Malworld 1 YouTube channel. Novel, Night Without Borders. Chapter 17, The Harvest. Author, Chen Dong. Translator, Shadow Knight AK. Editor, Shadow Knight AK. Only First Awakening. Fu Entao was devastated. He had undergone his second awakening many years ago, accumulating a deep foundation, yet he had been defeated by a mere First Awakener. He leaned on his longsword with one hand and with the other, yanked out the iron spear that had pierced his thigh. A torrent of blood gushed forth, sending him reeling from exhaustion. Xiao Chengfeng, missing an arm and pinned to the ground by the iron spear through his abdomen, struggled to pull it free. But when he saw Qin turn to look at him, he could only let his lone arm fall limply. The entire mountain patrol group. Wiped out by one person, Xiao Chengfeng realized he was doomed. There was no way the other side would leave any survivors. He's only a first awakener. Why is he so strong? Feng Yian muttered, wiping the blood from his mouth. Qin spoke, "Tell me something interesting." "Dream on." Fu Entao retorted defiantly. He knew his fate was sealed, and even groveling wouldn't change anything. Meanwhile, Feng Yian and Xiao Chengfeng remained silent. Normally, they were ruthless wolves, hardened killers. If groveling could save their lives, they wouldn't hesitate to beg for mercy on their knees. But that was unrealistic. They knew their deaths were inevitable. "Tell me about the blood bamboo forest," Qin said, approaching Xiao Chengfeng. Xiao Chengfeng remained silent, his eyes vacant as he stared at the night sky. He had already begun to review his past, knowing his life was about to end. "Won't talk, huh?" Qin didn't waste words. His wood-chopping knife fell with a thwack, severing Xiao Chengfeng's head from his body. Xiao Chengfeng's eyes widened in disbelief, his gaze fixed in death. His opponent had been decisive, killing him without hesitation. Qin had come to eliminate the mountain patrol group, not to torture them. Since Xiao Chengfeng refused to speak, there was no point in prolonging the agony. He wanted to see if the other two would break under the threat of death. Fu Entao's face twitched slightly, but his eyes burned with even greater ferocity. Gripping his long blade tightly, he slowly shifted his weight, preparing to attack again. A second awakener who had dominated this territory for years, Fu Entao was unafraid of death. He was a ruthless survivor forged in the harsh wilderness. Meanwhile, Feng Yian lay pinned to the ground, an iron spear piercing his back and anchoring him in place. He couldn't rise, but he trembled slightly. The wind and snow raged as Fu Entao charged forward like a human beast, swinging his blade with all his remaining strength in a final, desperate gamble. After their fierce clash, Fu Entao gasped for breath, utterly exhausted. He had truly reached his limit after fighting for so long, yet the young man before him remained as vigorous as ever, his chi and spirit brimming with vitality. PFF'd. After another exchange, Fu Entao's right arm was severed by a blade. His longsword clattered to the ground, his face turning deathly pale as he stumbled backward. Combined with the earlier spear wound that had pierced his leg, his severe injuries caused him to lose his balance. He knelt on one knee in the snow, panting heavily. His naturally curly hair clung damply to his head, his face etched with resentment and despair. "Do you have anything you want to say?" Qin asked. "Use my own longsword to end my suffering," Fu Entao gasped, his forehead slick with cold sweat. His left hand trembled as he clutched the wound where his arm had been severed, but blood had already soaked half his body, staining the snow crimson. "Why would I grant you such a wish?" Qin advanced, his wood-chopping knife raised. You want to humiliate me." Fu Entao struggled to rise. "You don't deserve it." Qin charged forward, his wood-chopping knife slicing across Fu Entao's neck. The head, its expression still one of defiance, flew through the air, and the body collapsed to the ground. Feng Yian lay there, his face ashen, struggling to sit up. But the iron spear embedded in his body barely trembled, proving impossible to pull free from the frozen earth. He felt humiliated. His opponent was standing before him, one foot planted firmly on his head. "Do you have something you want to say?" Qin asked, looking down at him. Feng Yian clenched his fists, then helplessly released them. He gasped heavily, saying, "You want to find spiritual creatures? I won't tell you." Qinming pressed down slightly harder with his foot. A faint crack echoed from Feng Yian's skull, indicating a partial fracture. The excruciating pain contorted his face. Without hesitation, Qinming brought his knife down in a single stroke, beheading the bearded man and ending his life. As for the location of the blood bamboo forest, he could simply ask Old Lu when he returned. In his youth, Old Lu had been ambitious and often accompanied the older mountain patrol group members into the mountains, gaining extensive knowledge of the fire spring distribution within the Great Mountain. Only the wind remained on the mountain, the jarring clash of steel replaced by an eerie silence. The entire mountain patrol group had been wiped out, all by Qinming alone. He murmured, "I've killed so many people, and I didn't hesitate." Qinming stood still, reflecting. Perhaps it was because he hadn't seen these men as his kind, but rather as mountain monsters, threats to the villagers. He began clearing the battlefield. The corpses could simply be thrown down the mountain for stomach burial. Various ferocious beasts roamed the dense forest, leaving nothing behind, not even bones. Qinming's frugality had become a habit. After searching Fu Entao, Feng Yian, and the others, he held up some glittering objects in the light of the fire spring, night silver. These coins were far more valuable than copper coins and were used for trade among merchants in town. The coins were round with a circular hole in the center, representing the missing sun, hence their name, night silver. Then Qinming discovered something even more precious, day gold. It was entirely golden and radiant, a perfect circle resembling the vanished sun, embodying people's hopes for a better future. Mountain patrolmen rarely carried much day gold with them into the mountains, totaling only 11 coins in this case. But for ordinary people, this was already a fortune. This wasn't the first time Qinming had found day gold. Before he contracted the strange illness, he had seen several corpses near a fallen fissure. He had not only discovered day gold but also a bottle of extremely valuable mineral essence liquid. Day gold was rarely used in Yintang, Silvervine town, so he had never spent any, fearing it would draw too much attention. He had also left the exquisitely crafted crystal vial, with its intricate carvings, untouched. After recovering from his illness, he had achieved awakening on his own. Moreover, he knew little about mineral essences and needed to understand them thoroughly before using them, to avoid wasting their true value. Most importantly, the current events would soon erupt, so it was best for him to maintain a low profile as a first awakener. "I've only awakened once. I don't have the strength to deal with the mountain patrol group. But after this incident simmers down, if I awaken a second time, I'll be fine." Qinming continued searching the mountain for loot. Fine armor, 100 refined longsword. All good stuff. He sighed in regret, caressing the armor and weapons. He decided to bury them separately across the mountain, digging them up later when he needed them to explore the blood bamboo forest. He was so simple and straightforward. He'd thoroughly searched every person from head to toe, not even sparing the golden mastiff. He lifted the golden mastiff, tempted to hack off a large chunk of golden mastiff meat and cook a hearty golden mastiff meat stew back at the cabin. He'd emerged in the middle of the night, waiting in the forest until the night mist dissipated. Then he'd fought the mountain patrol group until now, expending a tremendous amount of energy. His stomach had long since begun to growl. But he sighed and abandoned the idea, dropping the mastiff in the snow. For safety's sake, he couldn't linger here. He had to clear the battlefield quickly. Qinming entered a wooden cabin. He found it comfortably furnished, with a thick animal hide rug covering the floor. A silver dining set and a delicate carving knife for roasted meat adorned the table. Each jar in the row, when opened, released a rich, intoxicating aroma, clearly superior to the spicy, aged wine Xu Yiping's family had long finished. His search here yielded little, but in the collapsed wooden house, toppled during the fierce battle, he found a sword manual. Its ancient leather pages were worn and curled at the edges. It was evident that someone had often studied it, as it was filled with dense notes and annotations in various hands, bearing the mottled patina of age. As Qinming flipped through the manual, he recognized familiar sword techniques. Fu Entao's swordplay was merely a fraction of what the manual described. Later sections mentioned heavenly light and offered deeper insights. He quickly closed the manual without reading further, tucking it into his belongings. This ancient leather-bound book was far more valuable than the day gold. After thoroughly searching the area, golden ripples appeared on Qinming's skin. With each punch and kick, the remaining wooden houses exploded one after another. The wind was fierce now, swirling fragments of wood into the air, where they were swept down the mountain by the storm. The snow on the ground was constantly whipped up, mingling with the goose feather flakes falling from the sky, making it difficult to leave any trace at the scene. "What a pity about my chopping knife," Qinming muttered, examining the blade. It was riddled with nicks and dents, though forged from fine iron, it couldn't compare to the mountain patrol group's weapons. It's still usable, though, he decided, finding a whetstone nearby. He quickly ground away the damaged sections, then resharpened the blade, leaving it slightly narrower than before. Qinming carried all the corpses down the mountain and dumped them deep in the forest, watching as wild beasts emerged to drag them away. When he returned to the spot where he had ambushed the 4 men earlier, he found not even bone fragments remaining. Qinming moved aside a heavy stone and retrieved his bundle from a snow cave. He stripped off his tattered, blood-stained outer robe and armor, replacing them with clean clothes he usually wore. He burned what needed to be burned and buried what needed to be buried, including the day gold and the sword manual, which he left hidden in the mountains. Soon, he vanished into the dense forest. Qinming returned quietly, dragging a piece of prey. No one knew that this gentle-looking young man, who seemed no different from usual, had just been through a bloody battle. He boiled a pot of water, unusually using hot water instead of cold. He luxuriated in a hot bath, his tall, well-proportioned body gleaming with a crystalline sheen. His muscles flowed smoothly as he meticulously rinsed away any lingering traces of the recent bloody battle. Shortly after, he appeared at Lu Zi's home. "Uncle, what kind of meat is this?" Wen Rui asked, peering closely. Qinming held up a large slab of fresh meat and chuckled. "This is a delicious. They say dragon meat is best in the heavens, and donkey meat is best on the earth. Uncle hunted a wild donkey today. He had been haunted by the memory of the golden mastiff meat stew, deeply regretting his failure to eat the golden mastiff. Now, he planned to compensate himself with a donkey meat stew." Soon, laughter filled the air. "Uncle, this donkey meat is really delicious." Sitting before the steaming copper pot, Lu Zi, still nursing his injuries, spoke up. "Xiao Qin, you've already established a golden foundation. It's time to seriously consider your second awakening." Qinming nodded. "Don't worry, brother Lu. I have a plan." After the meal, Qinming returned home, pondering how to subtly inquire about the blood bamboo forest from old Lu. If he could advance his second awakening, he wouldn't delay. He was eager to venture into the mysterious blood bamboo forest as soon as possible. Blank. End of chapter. Subscribe to the MTL World at Malworld 1 YouTube channel. Novel, Night Without Borders. Chapter 18, Visitors from Wuxia City. Author, Chen Dong. Translator, Shadow Knight AK. Editor, Shadow Knight AK. As Qinming pondered, Xu Yuping knocked on his courtyard gate. "Xiao Qin, come out quickly. It's urgent." Qinming's heart skipped a beat. Could news of the mountain patrol group's annihilation have spread so quickly? "We leave in an hour," Xu Yuping told him. "Visitors from Wuxia City have arrived and want to meet the awakeners from the nearby villages." Xu Yuping lowered his voice. "Rumor has it they're all direct descendants of noble families. They've come to help us clear the mountains, but also to hone their skills." Qinming asked, "Finally, it's starting." Xu Yuping spoke solemnly. "You must perform well this time. These visitors are no ordinary people. Seize this opportunity to enter Wuxia City." An hour later, Xu Yuping's house was bustling with activity. Old Lu, looking spry, carried a thick-backed broadsword on his back and was fully armed in worn leather armor and a fine iron helmet. Qinming approached him. "Grandpa Lu, what are you doing? This is just a meeting today, not a mountain expedition." Old Lu replied, "Just getting used to it in advance." Yang Yongqing also took this matter seriously, carrying 2 swords on his back. "Though Shallow Knight shouldn't be dangerous, we still need someone to stay and guard the house. Uncle Lu, you've lost your vital qi and are already so old." Xu Yuping hadn't finished speaking before old Lu cut him off. "An old warhorse still yearns for the battlefield. Besides, I'm still as vigorous as a dragon and tiger. I could take both you and Yang Yongqing on at once." Old Lu insisted on going. Not everyone was willing to risk it all. The other 2 awakeners from the village and the injured Wang Qinggulan had no choice. The destination wasn't far, just 7 li away at a crossroads. Under the dim night sky, dense forest stretched in all directions. Over a dozen villages had received the notice, and the awakeners, known for their swift pace, began arriving one after another. Smaller villages like Twin Tree Village sent only 4 people, while larger ones sent over 10, totaling fewer than 100. The people from Wuxia City arrived even earlier, split into 3 teams. Nearly all were clad in armor and equipped with fine gear, waiting quietly ahead. The awakeners from the various villages also fell silent, intimidated by the gleaming armor and sharp swords before them, and perhaps also in awe of the noble elites from the magnificent city. Each of the 3 teams bore a unique clan emblem, with a dozen or so members in each. The 3 leaders standing at the front of each team were the most striking figures. One man stood a towering 3 meters tall, clad in black gold armor with black hair reaching past his shoulders. His eyes were as sharp as blades, radiating an overwhelming sense of pressure. His mount was equally eye-catching, a fiery red giant bull whose back was taller than a grown man. In addition to its 2 normal curved horns, it bore a third horn that jutted forward like a sharp sword. Upon seeing the awakeners from the villages arrive, the 3-meter-tall man did not remain seated on his bull, as one might expect. Instead, he dismounted and nodded to everyone, saying, "My name is Sao Long." He gave a brief introduction, explaining that many experts had come from Wuxia City, with over a dozen clans joining the mountain sweep. The young people from their 3 clans were responsible for this area. I'm Wei Jiru from the Wei clan, the woman among the 3 said, standing on a blue stone rather than next to the giant Cao Long. She wore a pure white fox fur coat, her black hair fluttering in the wind. Her fair, oval face was lit by a sweet, radiant smile, a beauty that would have a devastating effect on the young men from the villages. To the young people who had spent their lives guarding the great mountain and had never traveled far, this noble lady from the dazzling city seemed like a pure and ethereal immortal maiden in white robes, a vision they would struggle to forget for many years to come. Wei Jiru stood tall and graceful, her beauty undeniable. She tucked a strand of hair that had been blown loose by the wind behind her ear and spoke about the mountain sweep, then shared some news. This winter's heavy snow has blocked the roads, making it difficult to transport food from outside. But rest assured, Wuxia City has already dispatched giant beasts to pull grain carts, and the supplies will arrive soon. This announcement caused a stir of excitement, and the villagers' faces lit up with joy. However, some worried about whether the grain would be too expensive once it arrived. My name is Mu Qing, the last of the 3 team leaders said, their entire body shrouded in a black cloak that concealed even their face, making them appear quite mysterious. Even after speaking, it was impossible to tell whether they were male or female, their voice being androgynous. Mu Qing stated plainly that they were unfamiliar with the Great Mountain and needed local awakeners to guide them. This was the fundamental reason why the 3 teams had appeared here, to meet with the awakeners from each village. Those who joined their expedition would receive generous rewards. Cao Long mentioned that outstanding performers could earn valuable qi cultivation techniques, meditation techniques, and other rare treasures. This immediately sparked a lively discussion, with many eyes burning with excitement. The awakeners' techniques circulating in this area were generally quite basic. How do we prove we've performed outstandingly? Someone couldn't help but ask. By providing crucial information that prevents casualties among our ranks, hunting down unique mutated creatures, discovering locations where spiritual substances are being nurtured. People quickly realized that these rewards wouldn't be easy to obtain. The noble elites from Wuxia City weren't just here to temper their awakeners' bodies, they also aimed to explore the more mysterious regions of the Great Mountain. Wei Jiru added, if you discover any unusual phenomena in the mountains, report them to us immediately. That will also be considered providing valuable information. I know of a fissure in the mountains where silver threads once spread. Anyone who falls in, even if they manage to escape, is unlikely to survive. Does that count? Qinming realized it was someone from Shencang, Green Mulberry village who had spoken first. Clearly, people from nearby villages had also died there. Old Lu slapped his thigh and looked at Qinming, as if to say, someone beat us to it. Wei Jiru nodded. The magnetic field in the mountains is chaotic. The place you mentioned is likely a minor node. If you find another similar location, I'll give you an intermediate level secret manual for cultivation. She explained that these special nodes might persist for years. They would systematically search for and map them, leaving behind a mountain map for the local people to prevent future accidents. Cao Long spoke up. If you find a place where white mist rises and 5 colored clouds radiate in all directions, under no circumstances should you approach it. Those areas are far more dangerous. Anyone who can provide such a clue will receive a generous reward, a high-level qi cultivation technique. Many people gasped, their breaths growing heavy. Secret manuals of this level were too distant, too ethereal for them. Who wouldn't crave them? Some realized that the Wuxia city nobles' self-cultivation was merely a facade. They definitely had a more important purpose. The strange phenomena in the mountains hinted at secrets unknown to the locals. However, the awakeners from the various villages remained relatively calm. Even if they understood there was more to it, what could they do? Those dangerous realms were not places they could tread. Besides, whatever the Wuxia city nobles' true motives, they would ultimately help them clear the mountains and fend off the threats from the mountain's strange creatures. That was enough. Cao Long informed everyone that the Wuxia city elites and the mysterious beings deep within the Great Mountain were about to have their final negotiation. This time, it would take place outside the mountain, and a resolution was expected soon. The awakeners from the various villages whispered among themselves, discussing the news. Though they lived in this region, they had only heard legends of a handful of high-level spirits. Their deepest impression of the Great Mountain's depths was one of mystery, the unknown, and fear. It was a place shrouded in an awe-inspiring mist. Will we be able to watch the negotiation outside the mountain? The speaker was a young man from one of the 3 teams, his face still bearing a youthful innocence. He was a true greenhorn, fearless and eager to see what the top-tier creatures of the Great Mountain's depths looked like. The 3 teams had been quiet until now, but a sudden commotion erupted. They were all young, brimming with intense curiosity and a thirst for exploration. Cao Long towered over the others, his imposing physique radiating an oppressive aura. A mere glance from him was enough to silence the crowd. He didn't scold them, but nodded in response. Perhaps we'll have a chance. Immediately, the area buzzed with excited chatter. Qinming couldn't remain calm either. Aside from accidentally glimpsing the moon insect, he knew nothing about the other top-tier creatures and wanted to seize this opportunity to see their true forms. Wei Jiru, tall and slender, stood on a blue-gray stone, her pure white fox fur coat billowing in the wind, giving her an ethereal, otherworldly air. She then shared another piece of news. The situation is delicate right now. You may not know, but the chaos in the mountains isn't solely due to the magnetic field disturbances. Another group of high-level creatures has migrated here from afar, bringing their families and aiming to seize some of the mountain's resources. The crowd's expressions shifted upon hearing this. Wei Jiru continued, now that a new wave of high-level creatures has arrived, many dangerous species are being forced to expand beyond the mountains, encroaching on the living space of those outside. Xu Yuping asked, so the outer regions of the mountains, which had just briefly calmed down, will become extremely dangerous again. It's nothing to worry about, Mu Qing said, his voice neutral yet domineering. Who gave them permission to expand? We'll just drive them back. That's why we're conducting this mountain sweep. The awakeners from the various villages breathed a collective sigh of relief. The figure completely shrouded in a black cloak had bolstered their confidence. Mu Qing declared loudly, they've trespassed into forbidden territory, forgetting the pain of the past. We'll forcibly awaken them, reminding them that the dominance of two-legged humanoids in this land has never waned. Initially, the crowd was stirred by Mu Qing's impassioned words, their morale soaring. Even the strange term, two-legged humanoids, only caused a momentary flicker of unease. But when they saw Mu Qing continue his fiery speech, a fluffy golden tail suddenly emerged from beneath the black cloak, many people lost their composure. What species is this? Mu Qing, Cao Long reminded him. Wei Jiru said, Mu Qing is human. The three teams behind them remained calm, as if they already knew Mu Qing's condition. Qinming stared ahead, lost in thought, scrutinizing him again and again. Old Lu murmured, perhaps he's chosen a mystical path. Whether he's still human, or what state he's in now, is hard to say. This was the second different path Qinming had witnessed, following Cao Long's giant spirit god route. Cao Long said, now we must choose suitable companions. They will accompany us during the mountain sweep, guiding us through the mountain. Rest assured, their safety is guaranteed. He emphasized that no one was being forced to participate. Anyone who wished to leave was free to do so now. At the same time, Cao Long, Wei Jiru, and Mu Qing reiterated that the rewards for the mountain sweep included spiritual substances and advanced qi cultivation techniques, extremely generous prizes they would not hesitate to distribute. None of the awakeners present remained in the village. They had already made their choices, so no one left. Qinming naturally followed the crowd, not wanting to stand out. Wei Jiru smiled at Cao Long and Mu Qing, her radiant beauty captivating the crowd. Her smile held an ethereal sweetness that set her apart. She shook the name roster in her hand, indicating her desire to choose first. We'll each select one person at a time. You go first, Cao Long said, deferring to her. Mu Qing had no objections. Wei Jiru nodded with a smile. Then I won't be polite. The Wei clan is eager to recruit young men with a golden foundation. Who isn't? Mu Qing retorted, then whispered with Cao Long, negotiating who would choose first. Wei Jiru scanned the roster, her delicate eyebrows furrowing slightly in indecision. Finally, she called out two names. Who is Zhou Wubing? Who is Qinming? You can only choose one at a time, Mu Qing reminded her. Wei Jiru smiled. I know. I just wanted to take a look. Zhou Wubing stepped forward, standing half a head taller than the average person, his body powerfully built. He hadn't always been known by that name. As a sickly child, his parents had renamed him Zhou Wubing, meaning, Zhou, without illness, hoping to ward off misfortune. Only after distant relatives returned and finally cured him did he experience a true rebirth during his golden age. Qinming was surprised. Bingzi's demeanor had undergone a complete transformation. Once gaunt and sallow, with hair as yellow and wispy as autumn weeds, he now had thick, black hair and radiated vitality. Qinming stepped forward, standing calmly a head taller than Bingzi. Both of you have golden foundations. I'd love to invite both, Wei Jiru said with a smile, looking at them. Bingzi was no longer the frail youth of the past. Though momentarily dazzled by the radiant smile of this ethereal noble lady, he quickly regained his composure. At that moment, a young man emerged from the forest and hurried to Wei Jiru's side, whispering in her ear. Only then did people realize that the three families had sent more than just their three teams of inexperienced youths. Zhou Wubing was once sickly and frail. Yet after his awakening, his strength has been steadily growing. And he was taught by Xu Kong. Wei Jiru asked in surprise. After a brief, hushed conversation with the young man, she looked up, her beautiful eyes meeting Bingzi's. She smiled and beckoned him forward, choosing him. Blank. End of chapter. Subscribe to the MTL World at Malworld 1 YouTube channel. Novel, Night Without Borders. Chapter 19, Relentless March. Author, Chen Dong. Translator, Shadow Knight AK. Editor, Shadow Knight AK. Qinming stood in place, feeling no embarrassment at not being chosen. His demeanor was calm. Xu Yuping, however, was anxious for him, though there was nothing he could do. Yang Yongqing also felt sorry for him, recalling their earlier conversation where he joked about noble ladies joining the mountain sweep operation and urged Qin Ming to make a good impression. Wei Zhiru, skilled with words, greeted Qin Ming warmly, showering him with praise. She expressed her regret that Cao Long and Mu Qing wouldn't allow her to invite him to join their group, but suggested he visit her in Kai Sha City after the operation. Qin Ming, never one to put on airs, smiled and replied that if he left the area, Kai Sha City would be his first choice. I choose Qin Ming, Mu Qing announced. Qin Ming's body stiffened almost imperceptibly. He'd been perfectly composed when he wasn't chosen earlier, but now he felt a twinge of unease. The person before him, whose gender was uncertain and whose humanity was questionable, made him hesitate about entering the mountains with them. He suspected Mu Qing might be a higher-level being who had joined Kai Sha City. Otherwise, no matter how much a human body evolved, it shouldn't sprout a fluffy golden tail. What could he do? In this situation, there was no room for hesitation. He nodded his agreement without delay. Mu Qing seemed pleased with his response. Noticing he carried only a wood-chopping knife, he asked, "You lack a proper weapon. What type do you usually prefer?" Qin Ming replied, "Nothing's been decided yet." Mu Qing pondered for a moment before saying, "Some monsters in the mountains have tough scales and thick hides that ordinary swords and blades can't cut through. I'll give you a long-handled hammer. If you use it well, it's incredibly powerful, you can crush a monster's head with a single blow. But it's a heavy weapon. I don't know if you'll find it easy to handle." Mu Qing gestured to someone behind him, and a long-handled hammer forged from black gold was immediately brought forward. Qin Ming took it and casually swung it a few times, leaving afterimages that hummed through the air. He moved with the effortless grace of someone twirling a spear or dancing with a sword. Excellent. Mu Qing nodded, impressed by Qin Ming's immense strength. Wei Zhiru was inwardly startled. Her standards were high, but just from the way he handled the heavy hammer with such ease, she estimated his strength already approached the 600 jin threshold. Earlier, she had sent people to assess the two youths who had established a golden foundation. She had always thought Xu Yuping had exaggerated Qin Ming's abilities, but now she realized he hadn't. However, she didn't feel regret. Zhou Wubing, the youth she had chosen, had suffered a qi injury in his early years. As he underwent awakening, his original essence was gradually recovering, giving him immense potential. She estimated that once stable, he could lift at least 600 jin, a truly exceptional talent, especially since even Xu Kong valued and personally mentored him. Cao Long remained calm. He followed the giant spirit god path, blessed with innate divine strength. Mu Qing said, "I'll give you another short sword. In case you're caught in close quarters combat with a supernatural creature, you'll need a sharp short weapon." "Thank you." Qin Ming accepted the sword, finally armed with a weapon superior to those of the mountain patrol group. Next, Cao Long, Wei Zhiru, and Mu Qing quickly selected their teams. Old Lu, in his 70s, initially went unchosen. But he volunteered, claiming to know the great mountain like the back of his hand. Suddenly, he became highly sought after, with all three factions vying for his expertise. "I want to be on Xiao Qin's team," Old Lu said. "We're from the same village and know each other, so we can watch out for each other." Soon, the Cao family, Wei clan, and Mu family completed their selections. Everyone, the higher-ups will soon begin the final negotiation with the mysterious supernatural creatures in the Great Mountain. For now, we can only wait patiently. Cao Long, Wei Zhiru, and Mu Qing led their teams back to Yintang, Silvervine town, where they were currently staying. They instructed the selected awakeners to prepare thoroughly. Then, dozens more people emerged from the dense forest, joining the three teams as they departed. These were young men in full armor. On the journey back, Xu Yuping sighed. "It seems the people of Kai Sha City are just using us as guides. They're being polite and courteous, but they clearly don't respect our strength." Yang Yongqing spoke first. "The youths from those three teams are indeed here to hone their skills, but the dozens of experienced young and middle-aged men are the true backbone of the three families' mountain sweep operation and exploration of the mysterious land." Old Lu took a more pragmatic view. "They possess an advanced intent qi cultivation techniques. How can we possibly compete with them?" Xu Yuping shook his head. "I've been to Kai Sha City. Only a handful of core members of the noble families possess complete advanced cultivation scriptures." Based on his assessment, the so-called generous rewards wouldn't include the family's most closely guarded secrets. That would undermine their very foundations. "I suspect they'll offer fragments of advanced scriptures they've collected from the outside world, not their own family treasures. But even those fragments would be more than enough for someone in the nascent realm to achieve full mastery." Yang Yongqing's voice was filled with longing. Advanced intent qi cultivation techniques are incredibly rare. Even an incomplete version, one that only charts the path to the nascent realm, would drive anyone mad with desire. Qin Ming murmured, "If advanced scriptures are so precious, why would the three great families of Kai Sha City be willing to offer them? What hidden motives lie behind their interest in the Four Radiance Mist Haze land?" You're mistaken, old Lu corrected. There were actually over a dozen families present. Shortly after, they returned to the village. As shallow night neared its end, Qinming arrived at old Lu's door carrying a large chunk of donkey meat, claiming he was there for dinner. In truth, he wanted to ask about the blood bamboo forest. Old Lu lived at the village entrance, close to the fire spring. In the twilight, his gray-tiled, blue brick house was tinged with a faint crimson glow. As Qinming entered the courtyard, a yellow dog burst from its doghouse. It stood as tall as an adult's shoulder, its golden fur shimmering with a glossy sheen, revealing snow-white fangs. Qinming immediately thought of the golden mastiff from the mountain patrol group and couldn't help but glance at the dog again. Its plump, muscular build suggested excellent meat quality. The yellow dog seemed to sense Qinming's gaze. One moment it was baring its teeth, the next it tucked its tail between its legs and dove back into its doghouse, refusing to come out. Xiao Qin, why are you bringing meat to my house? Old Lu, though old, remained sharp. He appeared in the courtyard immediately. Qinming chuckled. Grandpa Lu, how about I trade you 2-blade horned deer for your big yellow dog? Woof, woof. The dog in the doghouse barked, tail tucked, head tilted toward its master as if pleading. This old dog is very spiritual, old Lu said. It's afraid of you, which means your recent hunting trips have cultivated a killing chi. Old Lu shook his head with a smile. I wouldn't trade with you. This dog is on the verge of mutating, and it's been supporting our family. It often brings back wild prey. Its spiritual nature is so high. Qinming exclaimed in surprise. Old Lu stroked his goatee. Of course. 2 months ago, it was so old it could barely walk. It disappeared for a few days, and when it returned, it started to improve. It'll definitely mutate before Yongqing's black goat. The saying about old dogs returning to the mountains, either dying there or returning stronger. It actually has a real-life example, Qinming marveled, staring at the big yellow dog. Old Lu chuckled. Speaking of which, you almost died when you fell into that crevice in the mountains last time. After a serious illness, you quickly experienced awakening. It's almost like an old dog returning to the mountains and coming back alive. Qinming wanted to punch him. This old man really didn't know how to speak. His mouth was too sharp, which explained why he never married the prettiest girl back then. Old Lu lowered his voice. That crevice you found is worth paying attention to. The major families of Kaisha City were all searching for those special nodes. There must be a deeper meaning behind it. Qinming shook his head. Unless I experience a second awakening, I won't approach that area again. He seized the opportunity to ask old Lu, Grandpa Lu, you know so much about the legends of spiritual creatures in the Great Mountain. Tell me about them. You little rascal, I knew you had something to ask me, old Lu chuckled, pointing at him. But his expression quickly turned serious. If spiritual treasures were so easy to obtain, why would I still be stuck here? You've laid a golden foundation. You're destined for second awakening. There's no need to risk your life. Qinming replied, didn't you say young people should have ambition? What's the point of living if you don't dare to be bold in your youth? I want to achieve second awakening as soon as possible and see the scenery from a higher vantage point. Did I really say that? Old Lu eyed him suspiciously. They hadn't gotten drunk the previous night, each having only half a cup of strong, aged liquor. Something like that, Qinming chuckled. It's true that young people should have grand ambitions, old Lu said. Because dreams tend to shrink with age. You need a high starting point. A biting wind whipped snow against the windows. Inside the Lu family's home, the dinner table steamed with a hearty meal centered around donkey meat. Qinming and old Lu talked late into the night, learning the names of some spiritual treasures, all located in extremely dangerous areas. Qinming also learned the location of the blood bamboo forest. Qinming had already suspected that the blood bamboo forest Feng Yan and Xiao Chengfeng were after likely fell within the mountain patrol group's jurisdiction. Sure enough, old Lu mentioned that the blood bamboo forest was only 6 miles from the mountain patrol group's base. That place was home to a species of snake whose entire body was a lustrous crimson, like it had been carved from red agate. Its flesh and gallbladder were brimming with vitality and spiritual energy. But these snakes were incredibly dangerous, even deadly. They possessed potent venom that could kill even an awakener with a single bite. If you're lucky enough to catch one, you must chop off its head and remove its venom glands. Otherwise, it won't be a tonic, but a death potion, old Lu warned. Besides its deadly venom, he explained, the blood snake's body is as hard as iron, possessing extraordinary strength and the ability to leap and fly. Even a small snake just a few feet long is more dangerous than many mountain beasts, capable of shooting through the air like an iron arrow, instantly piercing its opponent's body. That's why some calls it the blood snake, while others calls it the arrow snake. If you ever encountered a blood snake over 10 feet long in the mountains, the best course of action is to flee immediately. Old Lu recalled that the snake's nest had already existed when he was young. Decades later, it was certain that blood snakes had undergone secondary mutations. Qinming said, let's hope we don't encounter an even more powerful old snake. Swords and blades can't necessarily cut through a blood snake's body. They'll just spark against it. Among creatures of its level, it's incredibly fierce, with almost no weaknesses, Old Lu said, suddenly leaping to his feet and nearly overturning the table. His startled wife jumped, and his youngest grandson nearly burst into tears. What's wrong with you, old man? The old woman glared at him. Old Lu's face flushed crimson, as if he had regained his youth. He waved his arms excitedly, saying, how could I have forgotten this? Now that something's gone wrong in the Great Mountain, if the fire spring in the blood bamboo forest goes out, all the blood snakes there will freeze stiff. Wouldn't they be just lying there for anyone to pick up? He wished he had wings so he could fly into the Great Mountain to see for himself. Qinming immediately said, how about we go into the mountain tonight, Grandpa, and collect the spiritually potent blood snakes? Yes. Old Lu nodded vigorously. But then, as if struck by a sudden realization, he slumped back down, sighing. I should have known. Feng Yian, Xiao Chengfeng, and those other bastards are guarding the Great Mountain, desperately seeking a second awakening. How could they possibly overlook the spiritual treasures within their own territory? The old man looked utterly dejected, his earlier joy and excitement completely deflated. He sat there, slapping his thigh until it was nearly black and blue, furiously cursing the mountain patrol group. Those dog-faced bastards are just plain lucky. Are we about to get another Fuentao? They stumbled upon such a golden opportunity. I'd love to give them a faceful of golden excrement to leave them smelling sweet forever. That day, Qinming was relentless. He braved the snowstorm in the middle of the night to enter the Great Mountain, where he used a wood-chopping knife to kill Fu Entao, Feng Yian, and their men. Then, he met with the nobles of Kaisha City, followed by an evening of Old Lu's bragging about his mysterious encounters and bizarre experiences in the Great Mountain. Qinming returned home feeling slightly weary and soon fell into a deep sleep. The next morning, he woke early, quickly ate breakfast, and immediately headed back into the mountains. Blank. End of chapter. Subscribe to the MTL World at Malworld 1 YouTube channel. Novel. Night Without Borders. Chapter 20. Harmonizing with the World. Author. Chen Dong. Translator. Shadow Knight AK. Editor. Shadow Knight AK. In the dim light of early night, Qinming, carrying the long-handled black gold hammer and a short sword, moved through the forest with the speed of a whirlwind, as if about to lift off the ground. He felt a sense of urgency. The nobles from Kaisha City had arrived, and once they ventured into the mountains, they would undoubtedly begin searching for various spiritual materials. He couldn't let them beat him to the blood bamboo forest, for it held the key to his second awakening. As the night mist dissipated, the forest remained dimly lit, but his keen eyesight allowed him to clearly see the distant scenery. The blood bamboo forest won't be easy to enter. There's bound to be danger. Otherwise, Feng Yian and Xiao Chengfeng would have already taken action. Why wait until death to leave behind regrets? I'm being too impulsive. Icy snowflakes drifted onto his body, some even slipping down his neck. The chill gradually calmed Qinming. His frantic rush just now was no different from Old Lu's desperate scramble last night, as if he wished he had wings to fly into the blood bamboo forest and snatch up frozen blood snakes. Calm your mind, Qinming slowed his pace, adjusting his breathing in the mountain forest. It's just a second awakening. Even without spiritual substances, his own natural abilities would allow him to break through. An unsettled mind is prone to mistakes. Qinming trudged through the thick snow, his pace steady and unhurried. Gradually, he grew calmer and more composed. The blood bamboo forest must be extremely dangerous. The fact that even the mountain patrol group hesitated to act, despite the presence of a second awakening cultivator like Fu Entao, was enough to prove the point. Qinming moved silently through the dense forest, finally digging up the sword manual from a hidden spot. The ancient leather pages were curled at the edges and heavily worn, indicating frequent use in the past. The book wasn't thick, but it exuded a profound sense of antiquity. Qinming wondered where Fu Entao had obtained it. To read the crystallized efforts of those who came before, and to calm my own heart, Qinming murmured as he sat down in the forest clearing. Moments later, he was completely absorbed, his entire being immersed in the book. Unconsciously, he rose from the snow, holding the leather-bound manual in one hand and gripping the long-handled black gold hammer in the other, swinging it like a sword. This was originally a heavy weapon, but in his hands it moved with the lightness of a wooden mallet, wielded casually. Gradually, a sense of effortless grace and natural beauty emerged from his movements. To achieve awakening, one must cultivate corresponding scriptures, such as the Black Knight meditation technique and intent chi cultivation techniques, to enhance physical attributes like strength, flexibility, and speed. Combat techniques, on the other hand, are techniques that utilize one's physical strength and speed to achieve efficient offensive strikes. Qinming possessed exceptional physical prowess, surpassing the Golden Foundation level. However, his combat techniques lacked systematic training, consisting mostly of practical, improvised moves. Some originated from the unorthodox awakening technique he had practiced for years, derived from its unique movements. Others he had learned from veteran hunters in his village. His combat skills were honed through years of survival in the wilderness. The forest at night was a dangerous place. Hunting in such an environment meant facing attacks from ferocious birds and beasts. Even a split-second delay in reaction could mean death. Though his techniques were largely improvised, even bordering on the crude, their lethality was undeniable. His life-or-death struggles with wild beasts followed no rules, relying solely on strength, speed, and adaptability. This was precisely why Fu Entao found him so formidable. Qin Ming's attacks defied predictability, leaving no trace of any set pattern. As Qin Ming read the sword manual, he combined his experiences from battling fierce beasts, his insights gained from facing life-or-death situations, and his deep understanding of the text. He became completely engrossed, unconsciously holding the book in one hand and the hammer in the other, constantly modifying his sword stances based on his comprehension. Qin Ming absorbed the wisdom of the predecessors recorded in the sword manual. When he reached a peak of understanding, he increased the force of his movements. Although there was no actual sword. Instead, a palpable sword intent permeated the air, causing the snow on the ground to swirl upward. The long-handled black gold hammer transformed into a bolt of lightning, shattering the forest's tranquility. He swung his sword at a massive tree. In an instant, the thick trunk exploded into splinters. The sheer violence of the slash was overwhelming. Nearby, several strange creatures that had been eyeing him warily from the shadows for a long time were terrified into fleeing with their tails between their legs. Among them was a mutated black tiger, over 4 meters long, which turned tail and ran. Still daring to spy here? Not leaving, are you? Qin Ming noticed a human-faced vulture, far larger than its kind, circling just 20 meters above the forest floor, clinging to the trees and refusing to depart. Having just grasped the sword-throwing stance from the sword manual, Qin Ming immediately put it into practice. His heavy, hammer sword, vanished into the night, soaring high into the sky. PFF'd. Blood splattered midair as feathers rained down. The mutated human-faced vulture, with wings spanning several meters, had been fiercely menacing. Now, it was as fragile as porcelain, shattered by Qin Ming's sword-throwing stance. With 1,000 Jin force in his arms, the outcome was never in doubt. The long-handled black gold hammer smashed the massive beast, leaving it unrecognizable. Chunks of flesh and scattered feathers rained down to the ground. Some of the other worldly creatures watching from afar immediately fled, sensing the two-legged human was exceptionally brutal. They had to get away from him. This area was no longer safe. Excellent sword technique. Qin Ming exclaimed, lifting the long-handled black gold hammer and practicing the stance again. This sword manual was like a beacon in the night fog, illuminating his path. It integrated his practical combat experience and unorthodox technique, rapidly elevating his skills. Qin Ming became completely engrossed, losing himself in the practice. He was utterly captivated, unable to break free. Qin Ming practiced all the sword stances from beginning to end. While he hadn't achieved complete enlightenment, his combat skills had undoubtedly improved, and his overall strength had increased significantly. This sword manual was truly worth studying, leaving him deeply enlightened and of immense value. If Fu Entao had mastered this sword manual, he had become a real problem, Qin Ming muttered to himself. However, if Fu Entao could fully comprehend the book, he wouldn't have remained stuck at Second Awakening. This wasn't just a sword manual, it also contained research on the awakening technique, which greatly inspired Qin Ming. For example, the book mentioned heavenly light, which first manifests during the third awakening stage but will permeate the entire awakening domain. Even after reaching awakening perfection, one cannot escape the need for in-depth study of heavenly light. In an era where the sun had vanished, heavenly light embodied humanity's deepest hopes and boundless aspirations. The heavenly light described in the manual wasn't the celestial radiance people yearned for, but an inner light within the body, imbued with a beautiful name. After a person undergoes their third awakening, this heavenly light will begin to manifest, originating within the body, a sign of a fundamental shift in life's essence. At this stage, awakeners experience a significant surge in power, enabling them to contend with various dangerous mutated creatures with their bare hands. This transformation is entirely attributed to the heavenly light. Once the heavenly light manifests within the body, it gives rise to heavenly light force, a unique form of energy with exceptional piercing and tearing capabilities. Without this force, how could an awakener, with their delicate frame and diminutive stature compared to a giant beast, possibly stand against such a colossal behemoth? The emergence of heavenly light force allows awakeners to tear through the scales of mutated giant beasts, its power capable of penetrating their tough, resilient flesh. However, within the awakening domain, heavenly light force can only be deployed on the body's surface, extending slightly beyond the fists and feet. It cannot yet be channeled into weapons. In truth, heavenly light force is a broad term encompassing numerous subtypes. This sword manual has likely changed hands many times, its pages filled with insights, notes, and annotations from various individuals. One individual in particular held a deep reverence for a specific heavenly light force, leaving behind the lament, "I wish I could cultivate the Tathagata energy." For Qin Ming, an awakener who had honed his skills through unorthodox techniques, the descriptions and records within the manual filled him with a sense of serene longing. Alas, while the sword manual mentioned several extraordinary and powerful heavenly light forces by name, it offered no guidance on how to cultivate them. Qin Ming fell into a trance, pondering for a long time. Flipping further through the sword manual, Qin Ming found the content unsuitable for his current level. He hadn't yet reached that realm. However, among the insights left by the predecessors, he discovered a practical secret technique called harmonizing with the world, which could ensure his safety. After carefully studying it, Qin Ming broke out in a cold sweat, yet felt fortunate to have found this record. According to the predecessors, the gaze of high-level beings was terrifying. They could instantly perceive the strength of other beings' life force, even in the dead of night, seeing their biofields, whether strong or weak. This was terrifying. Low-level beings had no secrets from high-level beings. Especially when heavenly light emerged within an awakener or an anomaly develops heavenly light within their body, it was like a series of flames burning brightly in the darkness to high-level beings. I must master this quickly. Qin Ming wiped the cold sweat from his brow, suddenly feeling vulnerable in the mountains. Fortunately, harmonizing with the world was a practical secret technique, not an esoteric and difficult to understand ancient text. Contemplate emptiness and stillness, body like withered wood, heart like cold ash, conceal life force, gradually weaken, and dim the spirit and energy. Qin Ming slowly began to grasp the technique, marking his entry-level mastery. Qin Ming sat in meditation for a long time, silently contemplating and pondering. He gradually uncovered more secrets of harmonizing with the world. It could conceal a portion of his life force, allowing him to blend in with ordinary people. Moreover, this degree could be controlled. After reaching a certain level of mastery, even if heavenly light manifested in his body after 3 awakenings, he could conceal it if necessary. Qin Ming finally exhaled deeply. But after careful consideration, he chuckled wryly. Perhaps his sense of danger was too acute. Even if high-level beings passed through this area and could instantly discern his life force's strength, they likely wouldn't care. After all, he had only experienced 1 awakening. In the eyes of such extraordinary beings, he was just another insignificant member of the masses in the mountains. Then he thought of Kaisha City's elite. If they could negotiate and confront the mysterious beings in the mountains, they must possess similar abilities. Too much to chew on at once. I've learned enough today. I need to consolidate, master, and firmly grasp everything I've learned. Qin Ming rose, found a secluded spot, and reburied the sword manual. Without a doubt, he had gained immensely today. After thoroughly studying the sword stances and integrating his own insights, his strength had improved significantly. Qin Ming murmured, if I were to face Fu Entao, Feng Yan, or others like them in battle now, I think it would be much easier. Most importantly, the book had broadened his horizons, exposing him to knowledge he had never encountered before. Fu Entao isn't so bad after all. He gave me a truly valuable book. After leaving the secluded forest, he headed toward the blood bamboo forest. Blank. End of chapter. Subscribe to MTL World at Malworld 1 YouTube channel.